Okay, so everybody hear me okay back there? Okay, great, thanks. Welcome to our talk today. I should not get ahead of myself. We're going to talk about network telemetry. Is it still valid in today's cyber threat landscape? I met several of you yesterday. I see some familiar faces in the crowd. For those of you I didn't meet, we will, from an agenda perspective, I'll be talking about this network telemetry problem. And I'm hoping at the end we'll do a bit of a demo. If you didn't come to hear vendor marketing presentation, hopefully you'll find that this is not that. But we'll do the demo because some people indicated they were really interested in some of the things Corelight was doing. So I'll incorporate that into the slides. I think we have a hard stop at 1:15, so I'm gonna have to go faster. Anyway, so the good news is I don't own that, but I get to fly it. And I also, a little bit more about me, I have a wonderful spouse who's very supportive, and we can go out and share leaf-peeping flights when we have spare time to do that. So anyway, about Corelight. So founders of Zeek. Zeek was written in 1995 by Vern Paxson at Berkeley Labs out in California, and was known at the time as Bro because it was the idea of Big Brother could see everything in your network traffic, right? There was no encryption, everything was wide open, it was great stuff. But he wanted to know more about what was happening on the network because he couldn't see it without the right tooling. And so that's where the project was born. Corelight would later come to be in 2016. We were created to do take the open source and make it a more enterprise capable product because people were saying, hey, I need more support. I don't want to have to go on a Slack channel or an IRC channel or whatever the Jabber station was, so to speak. And so they wanted more supportable capability. So that's where Corelight came out of. Today, we are mission partners. We started in government, so we understand that workspace. We approach the network security problem from that perspective of being along to support. And so we have enterprises in the Fortune 2000 that cover finance, technology, healthcare, and you can read them up there. So we are a platform of choice in a couple of interesting places. Black Hat Knock, we participate there. Did those last year, and we'll continue to do those. And of course, Splunk's Boss of the SOC is also a place where you'll find Corelight technology. For extra credit, yep, we're the only open NDR platform in this space. So we take our pedigree from open source and we bring that to you, the customer, but we don't put it in a black box and hide it under the desk or in the server rack. We will completely expose everything to you, and anything you want to do with Zeek or Suricata that you've ever wanted to do, we'll support that for you. So it's really a kind of a different paradigm, and I'll get into more of that where we show that as well. Okay, what does it look like? So I know a lot of you stopped by yesterday, but at the end of the day, we get your traffic on the left-hand side. You have your packet brokers, your switches if you have to. We'll take a span port. Not ideal, but we'll do it. Same thing in the cloud. We have ability anywhere we can get packets from is the key. We will enrich data with or identify activity based on threat intelligence. So all that is built into the sensor space, and the sensor is up there in the middle. That's really the core technology, right? And the sensor is an appliance, whether it's in the cloud or it's on your Hyper-V or your VMware infrastructure. And so it's sitting there running Zeek Suricata and has the ability to do what we call smart PCAP. And so you can actually extract PCAP and files off the wire in real time as you need to based on parameters that you, the customer, set, which really changes the game from a perspective of not having to capture everything and then figure out how to get it. We do it the other way around. Fleet is a system manager, so that will manage all of your sensors no matter where they are on the globe. So if you're a global enterprise and you have sensors deployed on 6 or 7 continents, we can handle that with a single instance of Fleet. And then we have the 3 pillars I talked about: Zeek, Suricata, Smart PCAP. And then 2 years ago, actually, we rolled out Investigator. That is our SaaS platform, sits in the cloud. We'll take data streams off of the sensors. The logs will be processed through our machine learning pipelines. We'll generate alerts. Those alerts can be sent down to your alert manager, whatever that might be, or it can stay in Investigator for customers that prefer to work in the Investigator platform. They can. And we can also fork and filter the data anywhere you want. So we can be simultaneously sending to Splunk as well as Elastic, as well as Investigator, as well as S3 Bucket, as well as to an SFTP server, as well as syslog. So if you have different people doing different missions with the data, and they use different platforms in order to do their particular piece of the action, right, you can still get them the data they need without having to do any kind of heroics with regard to importing and exporting and filtering data out after we give it to you. So that's kind of unique in this space as well. All right. Where did this come from? Well, 30 years ago, this is how we did it, right? We started setting up SMTP servers. We figured out we actually needed firewalls. I remember deploying the first one around 95. And then all these things generated logs, and we started doing security by looking at the logs every time something happened. And of course, the biggest problem with all this problem, if you've done any of this work, is everything on the left-hand side generates the log, but none of them are the same. And so you can't figure out what your data, you can't figure out what the data is because everything calls something different, right? An IP address in one system might be IP adder, in another system it might be dest IP, in an email server it might be response host, it can be a whole bunch of things. So you have a real problem, right? And so we started to take all this and we said, well, we'll solve this with SIEM. We'll put that in there and we'll start figuring this out. And we've been doing that for a while, and I just threw this in here. When I did SIEM problems with SIEM, this came back, and I thought that's perfect. We'll just talk about that very briefly, but just to make it a little funny. So anyway, we did all that. And so today, in today's threat landscape, network detection and response kind of gets some, I hear in the field, I hear feedback from the CISOs and other decision makers. They're really not sure about this network thing anymore, right? This NDR thing. And we spent a lot of time with the EDR space. So I hope you understand the slide and what I'm trying to say there. The endpoint, right, became the focus about 10 years ago, maybe a little bit longer. We had a lot of activity that suggested we needed to do better than just antivirus and whatever we had. And so we had that going on. And then we had mobile, right? And everybody said, okay, well, there's no network. When the mobile device does its thing, I can't see it on the network. It doesn't go to my network. But that covers a lot of different things. We'll talk about that. The other thing we have encryption now, right? Last stat I have is in the realm of 90+% of all network traffic on an average network is encrypted. And cloud, right? Everything is in the cloud. So it's all out there. I don't have it anymore, right? It's not mine. And then telework, right? And then we hit the pandemic, right? So you're seeing the evolution in history here. Is this making sense? Okay. So we had telework, we had work from anywhere now. That's really important. It's great. I love it. I do it all the time. And so again, that sense that the network is kind of going away. And then we have SASE as part of that. We're going to talk about that a little bit more in depth, I think, later. And then we have the new VPN. So I came from the world of VPN around 2000, and there was this whole discussion about split tunneling. And now it seems to be the automatic default. I'm not really sure what that's about. But it doesn't fit the definition of VPN that I used to use. So I'll just point that out. So those are the challenges in terms of what thing people are thinking about in terms of, do I need network detection and response? And so the good news is some folks out there in the space have put together this idea of the SOC visibility triad. And the long and short of that is we've been focused on NDR down here. Sorry, EDR. And they've said, hey, look, if we really want to have complete visibility, you really got to do this kind of three-part stool where you've got your SIEM, you've got your EDR, but you have to have some network visibility. So that's the architecture that fits kind of the landscape that we need to be moving towards if we don't already have it. You all are here. I think the conference is going very well. The training's going well. So you guys are probably more in tune with, I need to have this, but this is more about, the feedback from other spots within your enterprise. What is the power of the network evidence, right? So a little marketing here, but I changed it a little bit. So adversary's dilemma, right? Anybody want to take a shot at what I mean by this? Anybody want to think what I think in the network space, what I mean by the adversary's dilemma? Sorry, just so this idea is they have to use it. They have to use the network. They don't have a choice, right? They are not going to be in building 7 on your facility. So they've got to, in order to achieve their mission objectives, they have to use the network. And that's something we have to keep in mind, right? Doesn't matter if your stuff is in the cloud or not. Second, endpoints can lie for a variety of reasons. You guys probably know better than I do. So I'll just leave it there. Also, detections are just what I call automated opinions. So if you get the detection, okay, great, I have a thing. Now what do I do with it, right? Should probably validate that it actually happened, and then I got to figure out where I'm going to go to get that information, right? So we want to get past detection. We really want to get to that response space, and then finally, that's where network telemetry comes in, right? We can actually take that back to our SIEM, look at it from the SOC visibility triad, use that network telemetry. We can get a complete picture of what we think was occurring, validate it, or even better, ideally, if you're thinking about some of the attack vectors that we've had over the last couple of years, you can prove a negative, right? Can actually say this didn't happen because it's not on the network. It's a great thing when you can do that, and I'll show you why. So generally speaking, like a variety of ways, logs can be deleted, so they can simply, there's no trace that they were there. They didn't actually record the activity because the logging level wasn't at the right level. The agent shut down inadvertently or based on some buffer experience. So I mean, there's a ton of scenarios, but I'm just saying, generally speaking, its trustworthiness is suspect, right? It would be nice to be able to see what actually happened on the network at the same time. And that's what's going on here, right? So we're not saying EDR is bad, right? Just to be clear, but just saying that there are some gaps. And so EDR actively monitors, does the deep security visibility, right? Some of its limitations are you can't put an agent on everything, right? So that's a challenge. They do generate a lot of data, and so does the network. So that's going to see that on both sides. And they did the bypass and the targeting, then, right? So we can do all that. So NDR fills out that space. We have broad security visibility where we have where, if nothing else, we can put sensors in important points next to our high value assets where our data lies if we need to. It's difficult to attack or evade, aka the attacker's dilemma. And anyway, and so in our approach, Corelight's approach, we sit off the wire, right? We sit and get a copy of all the packets from your packet broker or whatever. We're not in line and we're not doing protection services, mostly because that generates a whole set of expensive problems in terms of resiliency and architecture and performance. So we want to kind of keep that, kind of in balance with the mission. So let's talk about, sorry, want to cover one more thing. So encrypted payloads is the last thing in the limitation space. So I wanted to kind of jump into that. So encrypted traffic analysis is something that we provide at Corelight. This research continues. We do things like SSL fingerprinting, which is pretty straightforward. A lot of people do that now. The SSH fingerprinting, certificate monitoring for your encryption hygiene. I can't tell you, every time I go into a network environment, I say, show me all your SSL 3.0 devices, and they say, we don't have any. And then I say, yes, you do. And they're right here. So, or, who's using RC4 encryption, or, what is it about your encryption hygiene, and where is it? So that's something that the NDR space can support. SSH is obviously an attacker's friend. We'll talk more about that today. And then some things about being able to understand what encryption is happening in your environment, as I mentioned. DNS over HTTP, people bypassing your DNS controls by telling their browser to just skip that and go directly to the internet if they can, to get the answers that they probably shouldn't get because that will take them to places they really didn't mean to go, maybe. And RDP, right? This is, to my point of view, and we'll talk about this, the front door for ransomware, right? This is the new Norton PC Anywhere, from dating myself again, right? It's the front door that everybody leaves open. So, and the adversary loves it. So being able to see what's going on with that, monitor that, and alert on that is critical, right, to the current threat landscape that we're in. And then finally, VPNs, right? They've proliferated for a variety of reasons in the workspace, and so we are able to capture those and catalog those and let you know that they're operating in your environment, and you can identify whether that's a good thing, a bad thing, or a really bad thing. Okay, I like this one. I've used this before. I like it because it's the ransomware. There's not much ransomware here. So the way that the attackers did this is they hit the server, they found a team viewer opening, okay? And they got on there, and the team viewer had admin credentials on the domain, already logged in, and it still had an SSH server session to the ESXi host. So in the course of 3 hours, they actually developed a custom script on the team viewer host. and transmitted that and ransomware their environment. So we'll get back to this, but keep that in mind. It's a very important set of circumstances. And again, having that visibility into where are my team viewer access points, what's going on out there, what does that look like? Very important. Command and control, obviously, you're going to have the desire to detect on all the different issues here, right? So we got command and control for HTTP, you got DNS tunneling, interpreter, Cobalt Strike, internal capabilities, right? So in terms of our NDR approach, we have packages that will go ahead and identify these activities and bring them to your attention. So network evidence in action. So SolarWinds, we'll go sort of right to left here because that's the history, right? SolarWinds went ahead and the cool part of this was the attacker used supply chain to infect systems of interest or that they wanted to find or get into places they wanted to be in. And Mandiant was actually one of the patient zeros, if not the patient zero for this attack vector. They actually discovered it and they gave credit Corelight because our solution was what they used to validate that they had found something of interest. So pretty cool use case and pretty cool attribution for us. And so just point that out in terms of where we fit and where network detection fits. And then Log4j. Again, vulnerability in the way things were developed and authorized to approach and be used. And so these are great examples of what happens in zero-day circumstances, and you have the network telemetry already, and the metadata, by the way. So in both of these cases, if you have the network telemetry and metadata, you're going to be able to do some quick queries and say, hey, do I have this domain name in my environment that would indicate that is the indication, the IOC, right, that I need to be aware of? Do I have people using URIs that are bypassing the controls in my enterprise web server infrastructure, right, or not? And so when you can say not, it's time for a latte. When you have say, oh darn, we have a problem, you can get on it and you can start understanding the blast radius, right, within your environment based on the network telemetry. So two important use cases, I think, for where NDR fits. Also, thing that we do at Corelight is what we call a known entity collection. And so very cool approach for dealing with things like mobile devices. Mobile devices includes laptops, especially laptops that you didn't authorize your users to use, and maybe they used because they need to. And so long story short on that, for sake of time, is just to say we collect these 8 different logs as part of the thing that are taken in 15-minute snapshots. So consider this like cyber terrain mapping in the log format. Allows us to see passively everything that's happening in your environment, though in the network that we're monitoring, log that. And by doing so, changes the game when it comes to queries and big data, right? We've got dedicated logs. So in these 15-minute windows, it's very simple to say, in the last 24 hours, show me any device that's run Google Chrome in a Mac OS device, right? You can do those quickly and get back very quick answers. So again, saves the time for you to understand whether you have an issue. Maybe it saves you time doing threat hunting, but it changes the game in terms of the whole cyber terrain mapping and understanding what's in your environment, which is really part of the game here that's really hard to do. In all the years I've done this, I've never seen an accurate network map of anything. So this will at least move the ball closer for those people who are able to use it. Okay. 3 logos, and this is just a little bit of pedigree and history. So CrowdStrike and Mandiant, both in the incident response business, have both selected Corelight as part of their go to site kits, right? Their flyaway kits are enabled with Corelight, and Microsoft ported the Linux version of Linux binaries for Zeek, ported that into their Defender agent for E5 and A5 level customers, so they have Zeek logs that they can provide to customers. So just a little bit of understanding of the fact that some of the giants in this business today are very much believe that network telemetry is important. Sure.
So following along, I think network logs are super important, right?
I know, and you guys are probably the least people I need to convince of this, but you've got other people you answer to, right? So make sure that okay.
Yeah, just curious, right? It's probably answer my question. UEAV, like what exactly is it?
Yeah.
EDR, what is that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, so we're going to talk about, we have something we call CoreStrike, which is our Corelight and CrowdStrike integration. I will demo that today, so we'll get to that. And in terms of SOAR architecture, I'll just say that what we do is we generate really tremendously normalized and baseline. The data is awesome, right? The data has been, we've been doing this for 30 years, right? So the data is good. So when we're sending you the data out, you're getting the good data. Now, after that point, the integration part is important. And I don't know if you caught we only hit a slight part of the ecosystem with the CrowdStrike and Splunk, right? A lot of the things that everybody's using every day. But if you need to send the data somewhere, we have a syslog exporter, we have an HTTP exporter. You can filter and fork the data to anything you need to in order for it to make the decisions. You say, hey, you get this alert from Corelight. I need you to tell that thing to go quarantine that box right now, right? If it's, it's a high value thing. So yeah, all the integration is there, and that's part of the Corelight story is making all that work. But our first job is to get the really good data out, and then being able to get it to that is, yeah, so great question, and I hope that helps fill it in. Okay, so again, I tried to lighten this up a little bit, so sort of showing some of my age, but I call it of cloud tribbles and sex tapes. When you talk about the cloud, and I don't have a network anymore, or I don't have my data anymore, not sure how that works. It kind of reminds me of this. So you all are Captain Kirk, and you now have all your data in the cloud. And that's only because somebody told you had to go there. And now you're like, what am I supposed to do with this, right? How am I supposed to secure it? Well, there's plenty of cloud tools, just use those. Okay, do they do all the things I need? Who knows, right? So anyway, that's one thing with the cloud. The other one is no one understands it. Sorry, it's a really stupid joke, but I saw this movie 10 years ago, and that was the trailer was no one understands the cloud, and I just thought it was great, and it's still true today. So anyway, little light note, but anyway, for what Corelight does with the cloud, this is just an example. Well, we can deploy sensors in the cloud. Some clouds are easier than others to monitor. I'm just going to say it that way for today. But in this particular use case, right, we have a Log4j detection that's happening using, in this case, the Zeek notice. And then we have a UID, and we have that tied to an API call that will go out and enrich the con log, which is up here. So if those of you who are familiar with Zeek will understand it. The con log will have an additional enrichment that we pull back from, in this case, Amazon, that says, okay, these IP addresses 124 and 123, right, are ephemeral. They're, who knows, but we'll go back into the API and we'll get the information. In this case, it's an internal node to node, internal node communication, same IP address. But now we know what the node was, what its serial number was, and so we can identify that thing after the fact if we know we had a detection or a problem, because by the time we even see this alert, that node or that container may be blown away and gone, right? So know where we're going to find it. So this gives you an example of how we do that enriched detection in the cloud. SASE meets zero trust. Okay, so I'll just say it this way. I think there are SASE is great for the things that it does, and it makes a lot of sense. However, I don't think they want us to think that there's still a network anymore. So this is not the network you're looking for anymore. I'll take care of it for you, right? Or pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. So we'll handle it for you, and there's nothing to worry about. And I think, generally speaking, this is a space where I believe, in Bob's opinion, just be clear, that we need to enhance our visibility in these spaces and ask those folks that are doing this to give us better visibility into what's happening behind the curtain. So there's that. Okay, so about to wrap up on kind of the overview, my thoughts on this, but you didn't mention AI, and that's true, but I will, and because we talked about open NDR, and I'll talk about that, and we talk about zero trust. And so the beautiful part of all of this being an open NDR platform is that everything we do has already been on the internet for 30 years, and the models already know where to find the information and have already been able to learn it. So we don't have to train them on Zeek or Suricata, they've already done it. And so in our product today, if you remember the earlier slide in Investigator, we have done the prompt engineering and gone out and said, tell me everything you want I can know about handling 90,000 Suricata alerts, right? Every single Suricata alert now has a definition, what it means, how to triage it, next steps you should take, and all of that has been ported into our investigator platform for those customers using it. They don't have to train their SOC analysts at tier 1, to understand what these things mean that they've never seen before, because maybe that CERCOT alert hasn't fired in 6 years. So pretty cool stuff there. All right, and then I added this recently, and I'll give you some final thoughts about Bolt Typhoon and where I think things are headed in our threat landscape going forward. This is all my opinion, and none of it is based on anything other than my read of what I've seen so far, which I'll admit is not as deep as it should be. But what I will say is that I believe that the adversaries are pivoting from nowhere, my term, which is we know what the malware is. We have all the IOCs, we have VirusTotal, we have crowdsourced communications and data sharing, and the adversary is pivoting because they know this too, okay? And what are they pivoting to? Well, it just so happens, as I was putting this together, that I realized that the 4 things in this slide deck are exactly what I'm getting at. SolarWinds, really not a malware detection, right? Nobody saw their firewall and said, hey, how come you didn't detect me downloading bad SolarWinds? Log4j, same thing. There was no malware. I mean, there's malware, but there was nothing that made that sort of work, right? They kind of took advantage of the architecture of Minecraft servers, and other things. But anyway, they took advantage of an exploit and they went after it that way. But it really wasn't malware in my view of what malware is. And there's no guy, sitting in his office or cube somewhere, foreign country, his head down, beating out code to do this sort of stuff, right? Same thing with our ESS Sky example, right? They built the code, they built a script, right? I mean, could have been a MS-DOS batch file, right? So, so again, I would say no malware in that. And Vanguard Panda is all about living off the land, right? He doesn't want to do anything that's going to expose or build anything that's going to expose his TTPs. He's just going to run around and use Windows and Linux tools that are already sitting out there for him to use. So I'm calling that from nowhere to nowhere, right? So we know today in network detection, we have knowledge of the adversary's malware approach. We have ways to sandbox files and see if we can figure out what they're up to. And I would argue going forward that they're going to avoid doing that, and they're going to just use all the things we already know about, just use them in ways that we hadn't anticipated, right? And so just my unofficial opinion for what that's worth. Okay, so summarizing the talk, architecture is important. SOC visibility triad, definitely advise having that. The network is not going away. An evidence-based strategy diminishes your cyber defense. The asymmetry piece, I didn't really talk to this too much, but right, attacker dilemma, right, is good for us, bad for them, right? They only have to mess up once this time instead of the other way around, right? As soon as we can find them, look for them, find them, that's great for us, bad for them. We have the advantage in that particular case. I think for too long we've been fighting this the other way around. We have to get it right every day, and they just have to get lucky once. Okay, network telemetry it does a lot, and I think it's better in terms of being able to support the detections, right? Without it, it's hard to support it, what you think might be happening. And then having to do that with full PCAP has been proven to be very expensive and time-consuming and not very efficient from a SOC operations perspective. But PCAP still matters, and so we still have that capability in the NDR space. Extra credit, try it. Sorry, my life loves hyperbole and a half, so I just had to share. That's where we are today, right? It's just connect everything to everything. And so we wrote this blog entry. You can go out there and find it. And so if you would like to, and you have not done it before or not aware, and you have an extra Raspberry Pi hanging around, or you are willing to get one, you can get the code from us. We'll give you a license. You can install this on your home network, and you can actually do Corelight at home. So just check out, and then you might actually know who your fridge is talking to. All right, so demo. We're gonna hard stop at 1:15 as far as I know, so I'm gonna stick to that. Any questions, comments, concerns? Great, okay. So anything comes up with one, let me know. Now the hard part, I gotta switch screen, so just bear with me for a second. So the way I wanted to approach this was I just kind of give you an idea in terms of this is the fleet manager system. Kind of dug into it. We have our packages in here. If you're familiar with Zeek, you'll understand some of these things. Many of them are just curated right out of GitHub, but automatically purposed. Others are somewhat intellectual property based. And so, we have things like Bitcoin detector and adding enrichments for post bodies and JAW3 and things like that. So a whole bunch of things that we can do on the detection and enrichment side just using Zeek. We talked a little bit about our encrypted traffic capabilities, right? So we talked about certificate hygienes, right? We turn these on looking for encrypted DNS, other encryption detection stuff that may be out there that nothing like 443 with plain text, right? Somebody's doing FTP on 443, and we would pick that up and say, yeah, that's not right. RDP inferences, so we call them inferences, which things we're trying to understand. We don't necessarily see we don't see the payload. I did not clarify that earlier, and so I will do it now. Right, as far as break and inspect goes, or decrypting your traffic flows and things like that, we're certainly glad for customers are able to do that, send us the unencrypted data and process that down to the payload level. But for the reality of it is it's very expensive and hard to do well. Not impossible, but it's hard. And it's not something that every enterprise is going to choose to do, quite frankly. So this gives us an opportunity to say, hey, this is what your encrypted traffic environment looks like, and this is what we're seeing, and you might want to take a look at this. SSH, same thing, we talked about that. Stepping stones is kind of cool. Vern actually built this package a couple of years ago, and the idea is I call it the Edward Snowden detector. I don't know if he's listening, but anyway, the point is if you go from bastion host 1 to 2 to 3 to 4, instead of just going from bastion host 1 to 4, why did you try to scurry your tracks? So we try to detect that in real time on the wire. So right now it comes up, we do that in a four-hop approach of the algorithm, and we're looking at other tweaks we can do to expand that, but that's where we are today. VPN insights, we talked about that, 350 plus. Command and control, so DGAs, DNS tunnels, sliver detection. We also have Spicy plugin, so if anybody knows anything about Spicy, I'll just put a plugin for that, so to speak. And that is the ability, you can write your own protocol parsers, and then you don't have to know how to write them in Zeek or get them into our code. You can use a Spicy plugin, and you can take that framework and you can drop your custom protocol parser right into our Zeek sensor that way. Entity collection, we talked about those, and things you can turn on, app ID, checking your local subnets, making sure what you think your local subnets are. We'll tell you, we think actually this other thing is now a local subnet. Looks like the network admin team added some new VLANs. Analyzers get in depth with SMB, LDAP, OpenVPN, et cetera. Convergence of ICS and OT, right? Everything on the network, connect all the things. So we now have 14 different ones. We have partnered with, we have our US government partners supporting this, as well as some other things. And you got building automation control network stuff in there now. We're seeing a lot of that, right? And customers are doing a lot to bring their buildings together. I think a couple of casinos well, maybe wish they hadn't done that before they had this. Just leave it at that. And then under custom, the idea here is you can pull anything you want, and you can add those scripts. If you mic one, create one, find one on GitHub, you can add those scripts. Again, there's no constraint on what you can do with the system. On the enrichment side, you got Suricata, Smart PCAP, input framework. I'm just going to briefly, for time, go over Suricata more than anything else here, because I think I'm going to do that, actually. Okay. So fortunately, this version of my censoring demo, I just realized because I had to switch it this morning, does not have the capability. So suffice to say, I wish I'd known that earlier, but picking up the ball from that, we've changed this interface so that Suricata is now a UI-enabled interface, and you can go through and you can individually look at every Suricata rule in the rule set. We support ET Pro. We have a couple others. You can put any rule set you want into the Suricata engine, and then it's in the UI. So anytime you want to make a modification to this rule set, you can flip a tab, and the tab will change. You apply the policy, and it says, I need to understand why. And it won't let you save the policy until you explain why you added a rule, modified a rule, or removed it. So it gives you a better chance as a Suricata administrator to make it more accessible to those people who don't want to live in the YAML conf file business, right? And text file and hashtags. And it automates the change control so that you can get an idea 10 years from now when John's no longer with the company or the network team. then you can say, okay, I think John turned this off because the CISO asked him to. That's good to know. So we have all that in there. Since we have about 5 minutes, I am going to quickly move over to CoreStrike. So this is an integration we've done. Falcon is moving their platform to log scale, if you're not aware. And it's actually where Corelight built our investigator platform, which I will hopefully have a chance to demo here. And in this space, I'll drop into the dashboard, hopefully. And what you'll see is an integration between Corelight notices, the Suricata with notices, and the Falcon detections. And what I want you to take away from this screen is basically right in the middle here, these community IDs. So as you go down the list, you'll see the community ID in each pane, and you'll see some other dashboarding that we've done, and then the logs themselves. And so with this, I can pivot, and I can say, show me everything about that community ID, specifically, because I'm interested in that, which I didn't get to, but I kind of skipped over really quickly, but while it's loading. So this is a credential dump access, right? A T1003 MITRE enriched identified tactic. And so the credential dumping with DC sync is the issue that's being flagged in Corelight, and sometimes the cloud is slow. I don't know why it's that slow. All right, try this one more time. But sorry. So we'll go in and we'll ask for more information about that. And the idea would be, while that's loading, so you got one CF1 down here, and what you'll see potentially down here is you'll be finding, and it'll be automatically joining the one CF1 for in the Falcon detection space. And then those, there we go. Particular answers will be coming back. So there's the Falcon detection that's associated with the Zeek notice that we found up here. And those logs are going to find their way up here at the speed of the cloud today. And so you can see that the logs with path Kerberos are Corelight logs and dynamic protocol detection. And you'll see down here, you'll see the Falcon log, right? And nothing like base 64 encoding, I think, to validate that this is probably somebody running a PowerShell script that they don't want you to know anything about and cause some malicious activity. So that's the integration space between Corelight and CrowdStrike, and anything that supports community ID we can obviously support because we already have it. Okay, so pivot over to investigator. Maybe. There we go. Three minutes. Okay. So with the investigator, we bring up the basic dashboard. This is the Corelight's view of its data. Prior to this, we really didn't have a way to do this except through Splunk apps and such. So we take a kind of an entity-based approach first. We show you which entities are causing your biggest problems, the highest risk. And then with float over, we can show those detections here in the middle screen. We can also do it based on alert categories. And so we can show you where those detections are happening and which machines are impacted. We can also show you the idea of what's happening in the MITRE ATT&CK framework. So if you want to pivot from this particular approach to looking at your threat space, that's certainly valid. And I do like to just remind everybody that, hopefully you come in the morning, it looks something like this. And in terms of just some thoughtware that Corelight continues to do, we're very, we have academic roots and we like to kind of share knowledge. So we put that into the UI so you could see things that we're looking at, like the async rat malware over HTTPS was a recent thing that we published about, and so on and so forth. In the interest of time and having 1 minute, I just want to point out that we have in the alert catalog 4 types of detections. Machine learning, we have the Zeek notices. We have search-based detections that look for patterns in the log space that would otherwise go undetected in terms of different kinds of rats and things like that. And then Suricata alerts. So in the machine learning space, If I pivot on to this particular machine learning alert, may have to go back a few more days. I have the detection. There are 3 alerts associated with this. We do roll up alerts into, we can have thousands of alerts, but it can only one detection. When I view that detection, you'll start seeing the ChatGPT pieces here. And in that detection, you continue, when you explode that open, you get more about how to validate it, what next steps would be likely. This could be automated, right? These next steps could then be used to automate your store platform with playbooks from a knowledge space. And then in the alert space, the other thing that we do in our open NDR pedigree is we actually expose to you the algorithm that we use to build the model and what the values were for that particular detection, which is pretty unique. Most machine learning stuff is black box. Nobody's going to give you their algorithm. We take the opposite approach and say, you know, if the length of your subdomain infrastructure is causing a false positive, how are you going to tell us about that, right? You're not going to be able to see the score. So we can say, hey, we see the problem. You know the problem. You know your environment better than we do. Yeah, sure, we can tweak that part of our algorithm and make that better for you without having to do a month's worth of research and get some packet captures and send it off to the engineering team and see if they can figure out what could be done with the machine learning thing that's so great, it's intellectual property. So right on time, maybe a minute over. Sorry, I didn't leave a lot of time for questions. Maybe that was by design, but I'm happy to stick around and talk to people. If you want to have a more full-scale demo of what we do, please don't hesitate. That's really kind of what I get up every morning to do, so to speak. So I'd be happy to do that. It would be great to have your feedback and get some time with you all. And that's it. Thank you so much.